Life has a way of planting the most extraordinary seeds in the simplest of soil. On a storm-ravaged night in Kansas, Thomas Miller's weathered hands were meant for nothing more than saving his struggling wheat crop. Instead, they would pull a mysterious woman from the wreckage of a luxury car, an act of kindness that would forever change the autumn of his life. She wasn't just another stranded traveler, though it would take him days to discover her true identity. In his modest farmhouse, where every crack tells a story of hardship and perseverance, a remarkable tale was about to unfold. But what could a billionaire seeking an heir possibly see in a man who had nothing but his integrity and a heart of gold? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Thomas Miller's boots pressed familiar tracks into the morning dew as he crossed his front porch, pausing to run calloused fingers along the weathered foreclosure notice that had arrived the previous week. The paper had softened in the humid Kansas air, but its message remained hard as steel. 3 generations of Millers had worked this land, and now, at 48, he might be the one to lose it all. "Daddy, look!" 8-year-old Sarah's voice carried across the yard, where she stood beside the ancient red barn that had become her favorite morning spot since Marie passed. Her mother's garden still bloomed there, stubborn marigolds refusing to surrender to neglect, just like the Miller spirit. The sunflowers turned their faces to watch the sunrise. Thomas managed a smile, though his eyes carried the weight of another sleepless night spent with farm ledgers. "Just like your mama taught you, sweetheart. Nature's compass, pointing the way home." He lifted his thermos of coffee, black and bitter, the way life had been these past 2 years, and watched his daughter twirl among the flowers, her blonde hair catching the early light, just as Marie's used to. Inside his pocket, the bank statement crinkled. 6 months behind on payments, and the wheat wasn't looking promising. The drought had stretched on longer than anyone could remember, and even the old-timers at Pete's Diner were starting to whisper about selling out to those corporate farming operations. But Sarah's laughter anchored him here, to this land, to this life. She was thriving despite their losses, despite the empty chair at their breakfast table, despite the way other kids sometimes whispered about her worn dress and scuffed shoes. Miller pride, Marie would have called it. Miller stubbornness, more like. "Time for breakfast, sunshine," he called out, watching as she carefully picked 3 sunflowers, her morning ritual. One for her desk at school, one for the kitchen window, and one for Mama's picture on the mantel. "Miss Chen won't wait if you're late again." Sarah skipped up the porch steps, sunflowers clutched in small hands that still showed traces of yesterday's art project. "Can we have French toast, like Mama used to make?" Thomas felt the familiar tightening in his chest. Marie had been the one who made mornings magical, who turned simple bread and eggs into feasts fit for princesses. His attempts were always slightly burnt, never quite right. "How about oatmeal today? We've got some honey left." The slight fall in Sarah's shoulders didn't escape him, but she smiled anyway. "With cinnamon?" "With cinnamon," he promised, ushering her inside their modest farmhouse. The morning light filtered through worn curtains Marie had sewn herself, illuminating a home that was clean but showing its age. Paint peeled in corners, floorboards creaked their familiar songs, and the ancient refrigerator hummed its constant protest. As Sarah set the table, always 3 places, though only 2 would be used, Thomas stirred the oatmeal and checked his phone. The weather alert he'd been dreading had arrived. Severe storms expected by nightfall. The wheat wasn't ready for harvest, but he couldn't risk waiting any longer. One bad storm could wipe out everything. "Daddy?" Sarah's voice pulled him from his worries. She stood holding Marie's old photo album, discovered yet again in its hiding place beneath the couch. "Can we look at the pictures after school?" Thomas nodded, though each viewing was another small heartbreak. "Sure, sunshine, but right now you need to focus on finishing that oatmeal. Education's the one thing nobody can foreclose on." Sarah wrinkled her nose at his choice of words, but dug into her breakfast. Thomas watched her, seeing Marie in every gesture, every expression. His daughter had inherited her mother's determination, that spark that had made Marie stand out at the county fair 13 years ago, when she'd marched right up to him and declared his prize-winning bull was actually suffering from a minor respiratory infection. She'd been right, of course. The local vet's daughter, fresh out of veterinary school herself, too smart and too beautiful to settle for a simple farmer. But settle she had, turning down a prestigious practice in Kansas City to build a life here. Love grows best in open spaces, she'd always said, usually while dragging him out to dance under the stars after a long day's work. The kitchen radio crackled with the morning farm report. Wheat prices down again, more small farms filing for bankruptcy, a new corporate farming initiative promising to revolutionize the heartland. Thomas turned it off before the numbers could sink any deeper into his consciousness. Time for school, sunshine. He helped Sarah with her backpack, heavy with books from the library. She'd inherited Marie's love of learning, devouring stories about far-off places and scientific wonders. Miss Chen said you're the best reader. In class, Sarah beamed, but her smile faltered as she looked out at the gathering clouds. Will you be okay today, Daddy? With the storm coming. Thomas knelt down, straightening her small jacket. Millers have weathered every storm God's thrown at us for 3 generations. This one's no different. He kissed her forehead, breathing in the scent of honey and sunshine that somehow always clung to her. Now scoot, or you'll miss the bus. He watched from the porch as she ran down their long driveway, past the faded Miller family farm sign that his grandfather had carved by hand. The school bus appeared through the morning haze, yellow and reliable as the sun itself. Only when Sarah was safely aboard did Thomas allow his shoulders to sag. The foreclosure notice seemed to burn in his pocket, a paper fire threatening to consume everything he'd spent his life building. But there was work to be done, wheat to be saved, and no time for self-pity. He squared his shoulders, checked the sky one more time, and headed for the barn. Whatever this storm brought, he would face it standing. Catherine Palmer pressed her fingertips against the cool glass of her corner office window, 50 stories above Manhattan. Behind her, leather chairs sat empty around the mahogany conference table, but echoes of the board meeting still rang in her ears. Succession plans must be finalized, legacy of Palmer Industries at stake, biological or adopted heir required by the terms. At 53, she had built an empire that fed millions, revolutionized sustainable agriculture, and earned her a fortune that felt increasingly meaningless. The board meeting minutes lay scattered across the table, each page a reminder of what she'd sacrificed to reach these heights. No children, no marriage, not even a dog. Because who would walk it during 18-hour workdays? Ms. Palmer? Her assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Your pilot reports worsening conditions in Kansas. If you still plan to inspect the Midwest operations, tell him I'll drive. Catherine surprised herself with the decision. Cancel my weekend appointments. But the storm system, I need to think, Clara. Sometimes you can only see clearly when everything else goes dark. She ended the call before her assistant could protest, gathering her coat and car keys. The restored 1965 Mustang in the private garage below was her one indulgence, a reminder of summer drives with her father before Palmer Industries consumed him. The board's ultimatum weighed heavily as she navigated out of the city. 1 year to secure an heir or watch her controlling shares be redistributed among her cousins, the same relatives who'd tried to strip the company of its philanthropic mission after her father's death. Their vision of Palmer Industries began and ended with profit margins. Rain started falling as she crossed into Pennsylvania. Catherine welcomed it, along with the fading cell phone signal that meant fewer urgent emails from Clara. Out here, with nothing but asphalt and storm clouds ahead, she could finally breathe. Hours passed, marked only by coffee stops and gas. Station fills. The Mustang's engine purred beneath her, a mechanical lullaby that almost drowned out the voices of doubt. Almost. What kind of mother could she be now? after decades of choosing boardrooms over relationships. The idea of rushing an adoption or, God forbid, trying to conceive at her age felt like a corporate merger rather than a path to parenthood. Her father's words haunted her. Money grows fine crops, Catherine, but it takes love to raise anything of real value. Lightning split the Kansas sky as night fell, illuminating endless wheat fields bent low by wind. Her father would have known these fields, the families who worked them, their children's names. She knew only spreadsheets and yield projections. The storm intensified, rain drumming against the Mustang's roof like urgent fingers. Catherine squinted through the windshield, searching for familiar landmarks from her quarterly inspection routes. Everything looked different in the dark, in the rain, through eyes blurred by exhaustion and doubt. A sudden gust rocked the car. Catherine corrected, then overcorrected. The Mustang's tires lost their grip on the rain-slicked road. Time stretched like taffy as the car spun, each rotation showing her glimpses. A battered fence post, a field of wheat, a farmhouse light in the distance, the ground rushing up to meet her as the car left the road. The impact drove the air from her lungs. Metal screamed against earth, glass shattered, the world turned upside down, then right side up, then upside down again before finally settling into darkness. Catherine hung suspended by her seatbelt, tasting blood where she'd bit her lip. Rain pattered through broken windows. Somewhere, a wheel was still spinning, a soft whir like time running out. The board meeting minutes had spilled from her briefcase, turning to pulp in the rain. Her father's voice came to her again, clearer. Now, the best gifts often come disguised as disasters, Catherine. That's why you have to keep your heart open, even when it hurts. She tried to laugh at the irony, but managed only a wet cough. Here she was, one of the most powerful women in agriculture, about to die in a Kansas farm field. No heir, no legacy, no one to mourn except shareholders worried about their dividends. Lightning flashed again, illuminating a figure approaching through the rain. A man, tall and solid as the heartland itself. Behind him, barely visible, a red barn stood sentinel against the storm. "Hold on!" The voice was deep, steady. "I'm going to get you out." Then darkness took her, and Catherine Palmer, the woman who controlled the fate of 10,000 farms, surrendered to hands that knew the true meaning of harvest and hope. Thomas's work boots, caked with mud from the day's labor, stood by the back door like tired sentinels. He'd just gotten Sarah to bed, her worry about the storm soothed by their nightly ritual of hot chocolate and stories about her mother's adventures. As a young vet, the wind howled outside, rattling windows that had weathered half a century of Kansas tempests. He was checking the weather radar one last time when lightning illuminated the wheat field beyond his property line. In that brief, brilliant moment he saw it, the gleam of metal where no metal should be, a dark shape overturned at the edge of his field. "Sarah!" he called up the stairs, already pulling his boots back on. "Wake up, sunshine! We might have someone needing help." She appeared at the top of the stairs in her butterfly pajamas, instantly alert the way Marie used to be during emergency. Vet calls. "Should I get the first aid kit?" "Good thinking, and call Pete's house. He's closest. Tell him we might need his tow truck." Thomas grabbed his heavy flashlight and rain slicker, pausing only to squeeze Sarah's shoulder. "Lock the door behind me. Only open it if you hear my voice." The rain struck him like buckshot as he ran toward the overturned vehicle, flashlight beam bouncing across twisted metal and scattered glass. It was some kind of sports car, expensive by the look of it, though it was hard to tell now. The beam caught something else, a hand pale against dark upholstery. "Hello, can you hear me?" Thomas dropped to his knees beside the driver's window, mud soaking through his jeans. The woman was suspended upside down, held by her seatbelt. Blood trickled from a cut on her lip, but she was breathing. "Ma'am, if you can hear me, I'm going to get you out." Her eyes fluttered. "Father?" The word was barely a whisper. "No, ma'am, I'm Thomas Miller. You've had an accident on my farm." He tested the driver's door. jammed. The passenger side would be blocked by mud. That left the back door, or... Another flash of lightning showed him what he needed to see. The windshield was spiderwebbed, but mostly popped out of its frame. It would be tight, but he'd gotten calves through tighter spaces. "Ma'am, I'm going to cut your seatbelt. When I do, I'll catch you. Try to brace yourself if you can." He pulled out his pocket knife, always sharp, a farmer's first rule, and reached through the broken window. She made a small sound of acknowledgement. Good. Conscious enough to help, at least a little. The seatbelt parted with a snap. Thomas caught her weight, careful to support her neck as he eased her out through the windshield gap. She was lighter than he expected, dressed in what had probably been an expensive suit before the crash. The scent of her perfume, something subtle and sophisticated, seemed absurdly out of place in the rain-soaked wheat field. "Sarah," he called toward the house. "Get the guest room ready." "Already done, Daddy," Thomas smiled despite the situation. Marie would have been proud of their girl's quick thinking. He lifted the stranger more securely into his arms, one hand cradling her head against his shoulder. "Ma'am, we're going to get you somewhere dry. Can you tell me if anything feels broken?" "Just dizzy." Her voice was cultured Eastern. "The car, Pete'll take care of that once the storm passes. Right now we need to take care of you." Sarah had the door open as they approached, first aid kit ready on the coffee table. She'd even put on the kettle, Marie's first response to any crisis. "Daddy, she's bleeding." "Just a split lip, sunshine. Nothing your mama wouldn't have fixed." With the butterfly bandage, he carried the woman to their guest room, where Sarah had already turned down the covers of Marie's old four-poster bed. "Can you get one of Mama's old nightgowns, the soft blue one?" As he laid her gently on the bed, the woman's eyes opened fully for the first time. They were a striking grey, sharp with intelligence despite the confusion clouding them. "You carried me?" "Yes, ma'am. Storm's too bad for an ambulance right now, but I can get you to the hospital first thing in the morning if needed." He stepped back, suddenly aware of his mud-covered state. "Sarah's bringing you something dry to wear. She's only 8, but she's got good hands. Takes after her mama that way." "Sarah," the woman repeated softly. "Pretty name. Named for my grandmother." Thomas caught sight of his reflection in the old mirror, rain-soaked grey threading his temples, looking every bit the weathered farmer he was. "We'll let you rest, ma'am. Bathroom's first door on the right if you need it. We'll be just down the hall." "Catherine," she murmured, already drifting. "My name is Catherine." "Rest easy then, Catherine. You're safe now." Outside the guest room, Sarah waited with the promised nightgown and a steaming mug of tea. "Is she a princess, Daddy?" "Her shoes look like princess shoes." Thomas smiled, ruffling her hair. "No, sunshine. Just someone who took a wrong turn in the storm. Now back to bed. We've got chores in the morning, rain or shine." But as he tucked Sarah in for the second time that night, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that something more than chance had brought this stranger to his field. Marie would have called it providence. He called it one more worry on a night already full of them. The storm raged on, but inside the old farmhouse, 3 souls settled into an uneasy peace, unaware that their lives had just become inextricably entwined. Catherine woke to unfamiliar sounds, a rooster's distant crow, the low moo of cattle, and the gentle creak of old wood settling. Sunlight filtered through handmade lace curtains, casting delicate shadows across a quilt that smelled of lavender. And memory. For a moment she felt displaced in time, as if she'd wandered into someone else's life. Her clothes hung neatly over a chair, cleaned and pressed, though the expensive suit bore battle scars from the crash. Beside them sat a neatly folded set of women's clothing, faded jeans, a soft flannel shirt, practical undergarments still bearing department store tags. A note in careful cursive read, "Found these in Marie's drawer, never worn, should fit, T." The family photo album on the bedside table caught her eye. It lay open to a wedding picture, a younger Thomas Miller, still with that quiet strength in his eyes, standing beside a beautiful woman in a simple white dress. They were dancing in a barn, fairy lights twinkling above them, both laughing at some private joke. Catherine touched the photo gently, understanding now why Sarah's mother wasn't here. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Ms. Catherine?" Sarah's voice carried through the door. "Daddy says breakfast is ready if you're feeling up to it. I helped make the pancakes." "Thank you, Sarah. I'll be right there." Catherine changed into Marie's clothes, surprised by how comfortable they felt. Her reflection in the mirror showed a different woman than the one who'd left Manhattan. Softer, somehow, more human, without her armor of designer labels. The kitchen smelled of coffee and childhood memories. Thomas stood at the stove, sleeves rolled up to reveal muscled forearms dusted with flour. He turned at her entrance, spatula in hand, and for a moment something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps, of how right his late wife's clothes looked in the morning light. "Hope you like blueberry pancakes," he said gruffly, turning back to the stove. "Sarah insisted on using the last of our berries for our guest. I helped pick them last summer," Sarah added proudly from her place at the table. "Mama always said, wild berries taste better because they have to work harder to grow." Catherine sat where Sarah patted the chair beside her, noting how the little girl had set out the good china, probably reserved for holidays and special occasions. "Your mother sounds very wise." "She was a veterinarian," Sarah said, her chest puffing up with pride. "She could fix any animal, and she taught me all about plants, too. Look!" She pointed to a row of mason jars on the windowsill, each containing a different seedling. "That's my science project. I'm studying how different soils affect growth rates." Thomas set a plate of pancakes in front of Catherine, their edges slightly crispy, the way her father used to make them. "Sarah takes after her mama in the brains department, top of her class." "Daddy!" Sarah protested, blushing. "Miss Catherine doesn't want to hear about school." But Catherine found herself genuinely interested. When was the last time she'd had breakfast with anyone, let alone a family? Her usual morning routine involved protein shakes and earnings reports. "Actually, I'd love to hear about your project. My company does agricultural research." Thomas's hand paused briefly as he poured coffee. There it was, the first hint that he might suspect something about her identity. But he said nothing, just slid a mug toward her with cream and sugar already added, exactly the way she liked it. How had he known? "Really?" Sarah's eyes lit up. "Do you help plants grow better? Because our wheat—" She stopped abruptly, glancing at her father. "Sarah," Thomas said quietly, "why don't you go get ready for school? Bus will be here soon." The little girl nodded, understanding passing between father and daughter in a way that made Catherine's chest ache. As Sarah's footsteps bounded up the stairs, Thomas sat down heavily in his chair, looking at Catherine with new intensity. "I should thank you," Catherine said quickly, "for the clothes and for saving my life. Any farmer would have done the same." He studied her face. "Though not many people crash valuable cars at the edge of failing farms wearing Chanel suits." Catherine met his gaze steadily. "No, I suppose they don't." A long moment passed between them, filled with unasked questions. Finally, Thomas stood, his chair scraping against worn linoleum. "I've got chores to tend to. You're welcome to rest here as long as you need. Sarah leaves a house key under the blue flower pot if you want to go into town later." He paused at the door, one hand resting on the frame. "Just whatever you're running from or toward, Ms. Catherine. Remember, there's a little girl here who's already lost one mother. I'd appreciate it if you didn't encourage her hopes, unless you plan to stick around long enough to let them down gentle." The words hit Catherine like a physical blow. She watched him walk out into the morning sun, his shoulders straight despite the burdens he carried. Through the window she could see Sarah running to give him a goodbye hug before heading to the bus stop, both of them pausing to wave at the window where they knew she'd be watching. Catherine raised her hand in return, suddenly aware that she'd never felt more like an outsider and more at home in the same moment. The afternoon sun found Catherine in the barn, watching Thomas repair a tractor that looked older than both of them combined. She'd spent the morning exploring the farmhouse, finding hints of the family's story in every corner. Sarah's artwork, proudly displayed, Marie's veterinary degree hanging in the study, Thomas's careful mending of worn furniture. "Hand me that wrench!" Thomas's voice came muffled from under the tractor. Catherine selected it from the toolbox, recognizing it from the maintenance bays at Palmer Industries' research facilities. 5/8, she asked, placing it in his outstretched hand. His head appeared, grease-smeared and surprised. "You know your tools." "My father believed in hands-on education." She settled onto a hay bale, absently brushing dust from Marie's jeans. "He said you can't run something properly unless you understand how it works from the ground up." Thomas emerged fully, wiping his hands on a rag. "Sounds like a smart man." He gestured to the tractor. "This old girl's been in my family 30 years. Parts are getting hard to find, but she's still got some fight left." Like you, Catherine thought, remembering the foreclosure notice she'd glimpsed on his desk. The same notice her company had probably generated. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Tell that to the banks. He didn't quite meet her eyes. Or those corporate farms buying up everything in sight. A newspaper lay forgotten on a workbench, its headline making Catherine's heart skip. Palmer Industries expands. Midwest Holdings. Her own photograph stared up from the page, though Thomas hadn't seemed to make the connection yet. "Maybe the old and new can work together," she ventured. "Find a balance." Balance. Thomas's laugh held no humor. "There's no balance when one side holds all the cards." He stood, stretching his back. "Speaking of which, your car's been towed. And to Pete's garage. He says it's mostly cosmetic damage. Should be ready in a few days." Catherine nodded, though she had no intention of leaving so soon. Not when she was beginning to see something here, something that had eluded her in all her years of corporate acquisitions and efficiency reports. "Sarah will be disappointed," Thomas continued, his voice carefully neutral. "She's already planning to show you her whole garden after school." "I'd like that." Catherine stood, brushing hay from her borrowed jeans. "She reminds me of myself at that age, always asking questions, wanting to understand how things grow. And now, what does the grown-up version of that curious girl do?" The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Before Catherine could answer, Sarah's voice rang out from the barn entrance. "Daddy, Miss Catherine, look what we learned about in science today." She burst in, waving a magazine article. "It's about new farming techniques that could help during droughts and—" She stopped short, staring at the newspaper on the workbench. "Miss Catherine, that's you in the picture." Thomas moved faster than Catherine thought possible, snatching up the paper. His eyes scanned the article, shoulders tensing with each line. When he looked up, the warmth had drained from his expression. "Sarah, go start your homework," he said quietly. "But Daddy, now please." Sarah retreated, shooting worried glances over her shoulder. When her footsteps faded, Thomas turned to Catherine, holding up the paper like an indictment. "Catherine, Palmer, CEO of Palmer Industries." His voice was steady, but she could hear the hurt beneath it. "Were you going to mention that your company is the one trying to buy out half the farms in this county?" "Thomas, it's not that simple, isn't it? You crash on my land, accept my hospitality, wear my dead wife's clothes, let my daughter—" He stopped, pressing his lips together. "Was this some kind of corporate reconnaissance? See how the other half lives before you foreclose on them?" "No!" The denial burst from her with surprising force. "The accident was real. Everything that happened after, I never meant to deceive you, but you did." He crumpled the newspaper, tossing it aside. "I think it's time you called whatever service you use to pick up stranded CEOs. Sarah and I have work to do. Thomas, please." "Ms. Palmer." The formal address stung worse than anger would have. "Thank you for your interest in our little operation. I'm sure your board will enjoy hearing all about it." He walked out, leaving Catherine alone in the barn that suddenly felt as cold as her corner office 50 stories above Manhattan. Through the door she could see Sarah in her garden, small hands working the soil with determined focus, while Thomas stood watching, his posture a study in barely contained hurt. Catherine touched the worn softness of Marie's shirt, understanding now why it had felt so right. Here, she'd briefly been just Catherine, not a CEO, not a Palmer, not the woman who held the fate of countless family farms in her manicured hands. Just a woman who'd lost her way and found something real. Catherine sat in Marie's old rocking chair on the porch, watching the sunset paint the wheat fields gold. Her phone, finally charged, showed 43 missed calls from Clara and a dozen urgent emails from the board. None of it seemed important. Now, not after seeing the look in Thomas's eyes. The screen lit up with another call from Clara. This time, Catherine answered. "Catherine, thank God. We've been... Clara, I need the file on the Kansas acquisitions, everything we have on Miller. Family Farms." A pause. "Actually, that property was flagged in this morning's report. They're behind on payments, but the soil quality metrics and location make it a prime candidate for... Cancel it." Catherine's voice carried the same tone she used in board meetings. "Whatever proceedings we've started, stop them. Immediately. But the board tasked me with securing the company's future. I think I may have found a way to do that." Through the screen door, she could see Sarah helping Thomas with dinner. Their movements, a well-practiced dance around the kitchen, a better way. She ended the call and stood, squaring her shoulders. The Palmer Industries annual report was in her briefcase, salvaged from the crash. It was time for complete honesty. Inside, the kitchen fell silent at her entrance. Sarah looked between her father and Catherine, sensing the tension. "May I join you?" Catherine asked quietly. "I have something to show you both." Thomas studied her for a long moment, then nodded toward the empty chair. Marie's chair, Catherine realized. She placed the report on the table, opening to the first page where her father's portrait hung in the company timeline. "My father built Palmer Industries from a single-grain elevator in Nebraska," she began. "He believed farming was about more than profit. It was about feeding people, sustaining communities." She turned to a more recent page, showing sustainable farming initiatives. "When he died, my cousins wanted to strip away everything but the bottom line. I've been fighting to preserve his vision, but the board..." "The board what?" Thomas asked, his voice carefully neutral. "They're giving me 1 year to prove our philanthropic mission is sustainable. 1 year to find an heir who'll continue my father's legacy." Catherine looked directly at Thomas. "Someone who understands that the heart of agriculture isn't in boardrooms, it's in places like this." Sarah's eyes widened. "You want Daddy to help run your company?" "Sarah," Thomas warned, but Catherine pressed on. "I want a partnership. Your experience, your understanding of what farming really means, combined with our resources." She pulled out another document, the latest soil analysis of Miller Farms. "Your land has potential you haven't been able to develop because the banks won't take the risk. We could change that." Thomas's hands, calloused and strong, rested on the table. "And what exactly would this partnership involve?" "You'd help me understand what family farms really need, guide our research initiatives, our community programs. In return, Miller Farms would become a model operation, proving that traditional farming wisdom and modern technology can work together. And the Heir thing..." His eyes met hers, sharp and knowing. Catherine felt heat rise in her cheeks. "The board's requirements are specific. They want to ensure the company's future, a child raised understanding both worlds, the boardroom and the farm." "A child," Thomas repeated softly, glancing at Sarah, who was pretending not to listen while feeding scraps to the farm cat under the table. "Not as a corporate asset," Catherine added quickly, "but as someone who could bridge these worlds, the way your daughter already does with her science projects and garden experiments." Sarah's head popped up. "Like how Mama used her vet knowledge to help the farm." "Exactly like that," Catherine smiled, grateful for the child's intuition. "Your mother understood that knowledge and heart have to work together." Thomas pushed back from the table, walking to the window. The setting sun outlined him in gold, reminding Catherine of the wedding photo. Finally he turned. "Sarah, Go check on the chickens before dark. But Daddy, go on, Sunshine. When they were alone, Thomas faced Catherine fully. You're asking for a lot of trust from someone you deceived. I know. Catherine stood, moving closer but keeping the kitchen table between them. I deceived myself first, thinking I could run an agricultural empire without understanding the people who make it work. Your daughter taught me more about sustainable farming in one breakfast conversation than I've learned in a year of board meetings. Leave Sarah out of this. I can't. None of us can. This is about the future. Hers, yours, every farming family's. Catherine gestured to the golden fields outside. We can fight each other while corporations strip the heart out of places like this, or we can find a better way forward together. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence. From outside came Sarah's voice, talking to the chickens about her school day. Thomas's expression softened at the sound. I'll think about it, he said finally. That's all I can offer tonight. Catherine nodded, understanding that in his world, like hers, some decisions needed time to root and grow. Dawn found Thomas in his favorite thinking spot, the old oak tree where he'd proposed to Marie. The first draft of Catherine's partnership agreement lay in his lap, its legal language at odds with the morning birdsong. He'd spent half the night reading it, recognizing that beneath the corporate jargon lay something revolutionary. Penny for your thoughts? Catherine's voice startled him. She carried 2 mugs of coffee, offering one as a peace offering. She'd found another of Marie's. Outfits, worn jeans and a faded Kansas State sweatshirt that somehow looked as natural on her as designer suits ever had. A whole penny? Must be inflation. He accepted the coffee, noting she'd remembered how he took it. Been out here wondering what Marie would say about all this. Catherine settled onto a nearby stump, respecting his space while joining his contemplation of the sunrise. What do you think she'd say? Probably that I'm being stubborn. A hint of a smile touched his lips. She always said I had more pride than sense sometimes. Must be why she loved you. The words hung in the morning air, unexpected in their intimacy. Catherine busied herself with her coffee, trying to hide her blush. This agreement, Thomas tapped the papers. It's not just about saving my farm, is it? No, Catherine admitted. It's about saving something bigger, a way of life, a future where farms like yours don't disappear into corporate holdings. She paused, gathering courage. And yes, it's about finding an heir, but not the way the board expects. Thomas raised an eyebrow, waiting. They want a successor who understands both worlds, someone raised with corporate knowledge and farming wisdom. She met his eyes. Sarah already has that potential. I've seen it in how she approaches problems, how she combines your practical experience with her scientific curiosity. You're talking about my daughter's future before I've even agreed to anything. His voice carried a warning. I'm talking about possibilities. Catherine stood, pacing in a way that reminded Thomas of Sarah working out a difficult math problem. What if we could create something new, not just preserving family farms, but evolving them, teaching the next generation to combine tradition with innovation, while providing you with an heir? The words weren't accusatory, just direct. Yes. Catherine stopped pacing, facing him squarely. I need an heir who'll understand that profit without purpose is meaningless. Sarah already knows that instinctively. She sees the connection between her garden experiments and feeding people, between soil health and community health. She's 8. She's brilliant, like her father. Catherine sat back down, closer this time. Like her mother was. Thomas studied her face, seeing something there he hadn't expected. Not calculation or corporate maneuvering, but genuine hope. And how exactly would this work? The agreement mentions shared residence, joint decision-making. I'd split my time between here and the corporate offices. We'd raise any future children together here on the farm, but with access to the resources they'd need to eventually lead Palmer Industries. She gestured to the wheat fields, golden in the rising sun. Your knowledge, your values, combined. With my father's vision for ethical agriculture, Sarah would have opportunities she deserves while staying rooted in the life you've built. And us? Thomas asked quietly. Where do we fit in this grand plan? Catherine's breath caught. This was the question she'd been both dreading and hoping for. I think we could build something real, not just a business partnership. My father always said the best crop needs both strong roots and room to grow. Thomas was silent for a long moment, watching a red-tailed hawk circle above the wheat. Finally, he spoke. Marie used to say that love was like farming. You have to trust in tomorrow while working with what you have today. He stood, offering Catherine his hand. She took it, feeling the strength in his calloused fingers. I'm not agreeing to everything, he said. Not yet, but I'm willing to plant this seed and see what grows. Catherine squeezed his hand, understanding all he wasn't saying. About trust that needed to be rebuilt. About a daughter's heart that needed to be protected. About two people from different worlds finding common ground in the Kansas soil. That's all I'm asking for, she replied. A chance to grow something new. The sun cleared the horizon, painting them both in morning gold. From the house came the sounds of Sarah starting her day, her voice carrying as she talked to her garden seedlings. Standing there, hands still linked, they looked less like a CEO and a farmer, and more like two people discovering that sometimes the best harvests come from unexpected plantings. The farm's weather-beaten account books lay open on the kitchen table beside Catherine's sleek laptop, a visual metaphor for the worlds they were trying to bridge. Thomas watched as Catherine reviewed his careful pencil notations, her fingers trailing across years of harvest records and equipment repairs. Your grandfather was meticulous, she remarked, comparing his rainfall records to historical data. These patterns, they're invaluable for climate adaptation research. Would be more valuable if they helped with the mortgage. Thomas closed the most recent ledger, its red ink a stark testament to 3 years of drought. Catherine's fingers flew across her keyboard. Actually, they might. Palmer Industries has been developing drought-resistant wheat varieties, but we need test fields with comprehensive historical data. She turned the screen toward him. Your farm would be perfect for the pilot program. Test fields? Thomas frowned. You mean genetically modified crops? Traditionally crossbred strains, Catherine corrected. My father believed in working with nature, not rewriting it. These varieties are derived from heritage wheat that naturally thrived in dry conditions. Before Thomas could respond, Sarah burst through the door, her school backpack clutched to her chest. Miss Catherine, can you help with my science project? We're supposed to make a presentation about modern farming, and since you're here— Slow down, sunshine, Thomas interrupted, but Catherine was already clearing space at the table. I'd love to help, she said, then caught Thomas's eye. If your father approves. Thomas recognized the olive branch for what it was. Why don't you show us what you're thinking? Sarah dumped her backpack's contents onto the table. Soil samples. From her garden, carefully labeled graphs of plant growth, and a dog-eared copy of Marie's old botany textbook. I want to show how different farming methods affect soil health. Like how Daddy's no-till technique helps retain moisture, and how crop rotation— That's your mama's influence showing, Thomas said softly, but Sarah was focused on Catherine now. Could you tell me about how big farms use computers to monitor soil conditions? Jimmy's dad has a corporate farm, and he said they use satellites. Catherine glanced at Thomas, seeking permission. At his nod, she pulled up Palmer Industries' satellite imaging system. See these different colors. They show soil moisture levels across entire fields. But your father's method of walking the land, feeling the soil, that's just as important. Technology should enhance farming wisdom, not replace it. Sarah's eyes shone. Can I show the class? Please, Daddy? Thomas watched his daughter's excitement, remembering how Marie had always pushed him to embrace new ideas. As long as you explain why we still need farmers walking their fields. I will. Sarah hugged them both impulsively, then raced upstairs. With her project materials, she's a natural bridge builder, Catherine observed, closing her laptop. Sees the value in both worlds without any preconceptions, like her mother. Thomas picked up a framed photo from the sideboard. Marie in her vet coat, teaching a young Sarah how to use a stethoscope. Marie always said progress wasn't about choosing between old and new, but about finding the best of both. Wise woman. Catherine stepped closer, studying the photo. Sarah has her smile and her heart. Thomas set the photo down carefully. Speaking of hearts, the church socials this Saturday. Whole community comes out for potluck and dancing. Might be a good way for you to meet the folks you're hoping to help. Catherine blinked, surprised by what felt very much like an invitation to a date. I'd like that, though I should warn you, my dancing's more boardroom than barn. Marie was a terrible dancer at first, too. His eyes crinkled with the memory. Stepped on my feet all through our first social. By our wedding, she was teaching. Me new steps. The comparison hung between them, full of possibility and hesitation. Catherine broke the moment by reaching for her phone. I should call Clara, have her send some preliminary data on the test fields program. Catherine. Thomas's voice stopped her. About Saturday. Folks around here dress casual, but something tells me you'd look just fine in Marie's blue sundress. The one in the back of the closet never worn. He headed outside before she could respond, but Catherine found herself smiling. Opening her corporate calendar, she moved 3 board meetings and a shareholders' presentation without hesitation. Some harvests, she was learning, were worth rearranging life for. Through the window, she watched Thomas and Sarah in the garden, heads bent together over her science project. The sun caught the silver in his hair, the gold in hers, and Catherine felt something shift in her heart, like soil finally ready for planting. Sarah's hand-drawn picture lay on the refrigerator, held by a magnet shaped like a tractor, 3 figures standing before a farmhouse, the tallest wearing what looked suspiciously like a business suit, the middle one in overalls, and the smallest, holding what might have been either a microscope or a watering can. Our family was written across the top in careful 3rd-grade cursive. Catherine found herself studying it while waiting for the pie crust to chill. She'd insisted on contributing to the church social's potluck, though her baking experience was limited to watching the family cook during childhood holidays. "You're doing it wrong," Sarah announced, peering into the bowl where Catherine was attempting to mix filling. "Mama always said apple pieces should be the size of a child's thumb, and you're making them too small. Is that so?" Catherine welcomed the guidance, remembering board meetings where million-dollar decisions had felt less daunting than this pie. "What other secrets did your mama share?" "She said baking is science plus love." Sarah climbed onto a stool, reaching for the cinnamon. "Like, the chemistry has to be right, but you also need to put your heart in it. That's why her pies always won at the fair." "Your mama won a lot of hearts with her cooking," Thomas added, entering the kitchen with an armload of fresh apples from the old tree behind the barn. "Among other things." Catherine caught the warmth in his voice, the way memory had softened, from pain to gentle remembrance. "Tell me about how you met." "Oh, please tell the vet story." Sarah bounced on her stool. "It's my favorite." Thomas began sorting apples, his hands moving with practiced ease. "Well, I was showing my prize bull at the county fair. Thought I had the blue ribbon in the bag until this young vet student marched up and informed me, right in front of the judges, that my bull had a respiratory infection." "Was she right?" Catherine asked, already knowing the answer. "Course. She was. Marie had a gift for seeing what others missed." He paused, glancing at Catherine's pie attempt. "Speaking of which, you'll want to add more butter to that filling. Keeps the apples from drying out." Their fingers brushed as he handed her the butter dish. Catherine felt the familiar spark, stronger now after days of shared meals and evening conversations on the porch. She'd started staying up later, learning to read the nighttime language of crickets and distant coyotes, finding peace in the rhythm of Thomas's rocking chair beside hers. "Tell her about the dancing, Daddy," Sarah insisted, carefully measuring cinnamon, "about how Mama taught you at the social." Now that's a story better shown than told. Thomas wiped his hands on a dish towel. Miss Catherine here needs to learn. Before Saturday, don't you think? Before Catherine could protest, he'd turned on the old radio, sitting on the windowsill. A country waltz filled the kitchen, and Thomas extended his hand with exaggerated formality. May I? Catherine hesitated only a moment before taking his hand. I warned you about my dancing. Good thing you've got 2 teachers then. He drew her into the center of the kitchen, one hand settling respectfully at her waist. Sarah, show Miss Catherine the counting. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Sarah demonstrated, twirling with her own invisible partner. See? Easy as pie. Catherine tried to focus on the steps, but found herself increasingly aware of Thomas's steady presence, the strength in his farmer's hands, the way his eyes crinkled when she stumbled. He smelled of autumn air and fresh apples, so different from the antiseptic corporate world she'd left behind. You're thinking too hard, he murmured, guiding her through a turn. Dancing's like farming. You have to trust your partner and feel the rhythm. Is that what Marie told you? Marie told me a lot of things. Most of them turned out to be right. He glanced at Sarah, still dancing with her imagination. She'd have liked you, you know. Your determination. The way you care about doing things right. Catherine felt tears threatening. Even though I represent everything she was trying to get away from. Marie wasn't running away from anything. She was running toward what mattered. The music slowed, and their dancing became little more than a gentle sway. Like someone else. I'm getting to know. Sarah's voice broke the moment. The pie filling. It's going to get too warm. They separated, laughing, and returned to their baking. But something had shifted, as tangible as the golden afternoon light streaming through Marie's lace curtains. Catherine caught sight of Sarah's drawing again and realized she'd stopped seeing it as a child's fantasy. Somewhere between corporate strategy and apple pie, between formal dances and kitchen waltzes, this farmhouse had started feeling like home. And that, she realized, was what terrified and thrilled her most of all. The anonymous letter arrived with the morning mail, its corporate letterhead deliberately removed, but the threat clear enough. The board questions your extended research. Stay at Miller Farms. Remember where your loyalties lie. Some of us wonder if you're going native or just going soft. Catherine stood at the kitchen window, the paper trembling slightly in her hands. Outside, Thomas and Sarah worked in the garden, their heads bent together over new seedlings. The scene was so peaceful, so right, that the letter's implicit menace felt like a physical blow. Her phone buzzed. Clara. Catherine, I've held them off as long as I can. The board's calling an emergency session. They're saying your absence during harvest planning is destabilizing investor confidence. They're saying I'm compromised. Catherine watched Thomas demonstrate proper transplanting technique to Sarah, his hands gentle with both child and seedling. That I've lost objectivity. They're saying a lot of things. Clara's voice softened. Some of your cousins are pushing for a vote of no confidence. They're using the Miller Farm situation as proof you're unfit to lead. Because I stopped a predatory foreclosure. Because you're living with the foreclosure target. Clara paused. The photos aren't helping. Catherine's breath caught. What photos? Someone's been watching the farm. They have pictures of you at some church social, dancing with Thomas Miller. You in his late wife's clothes, playing mother to his daughter. The board's calling it a scandal in the making. The church social. Catherine closed her eyes, remembering that perfect evening. Thomas teaching her to two-step under the stars. Sarah proudly introducing her to school friends as our Ms. Catherine. The community's cautious acceptance warming into genuine welcome. Now it felt tainted, twisted into something sordid by corporate politics. What's their play? Catherine forced herself to think like a CEO again. They're claiming you're deliberately tanking the company's expansion to protect your personal interests. Clara's hesitation spoke volumes. There's a motion to remove you from merger decisions regarding family farms. They can't. My father's voting shares. are contingent on you producing an heir within the year. They're saying your behavior suggests a conflict of interest that invalidates your authority. Another pause. Catherine, is there something you need to tell me about Thomas Miller? Catherine watched Thomas lift Sarah onto his shoulders, their laughter carrying through the glass. He's everything they'll never understand, Clara. A man who measures wealth in sunsets and soil quality, who teaches his daughter that profit without purpose is pointless. My God! Clara's voice held equal parts understanding and alarm. You're in love with him. I'm in love with what he represents, what my father was trying to preserve. Catherine straightened her spine. Schedule the board meeting, but first, send me everything we have on sustainable farming initiatives. And Clara, get me the original copy of my father's will, the full version, not the summary the board uses. She ended the call and stepped onto the porch. Thomas looked up, his smile fading as he read her expression. Bad news from the corporate world? Catherine held up the anonymous letter. Someone's been watching us, taking pictures, using them to challenge my leadership. Thomas set Sarah down gently. Sunshine, go check on your science project. But Daddy, please, Sarah. When they were alone, Thomas took the letter, his jaw tightening as he read. This puts you in a difficult position. It puts us in a difficult position. Catherine touched his arm. They're trying to force a choice, the company or this. His voice was carefully neutral. You, Sarah, the life we've been building. Catherine gestured to the farm, the garden, the future they'd begun to imagine. Everything that matters. Catherine, Thomas turned to face her fully. I won't be the reason you lose your father's company. Maybe we've been fooling ourselves, thinking we could bridge these worlds. No. The fierceness in her voice surprised them both. My father built Palmer Industries to protect farms like yours, families like yours. If the board wants a fight, they'll get one. And if you lose... Catherine looked at the garden where Sarah had planted her experimental crops, at the wheat fields stretching to the horizon, at the man who had taught her that true wealth grew from the soil up. Then I lose a company but keep my soul. She squared her shoulders. But I'm not planning to lose. Palmer Industries needs your wisdom, your values, Sarah's vision of the future. They just don't know it yet. Thomas studied her face for a long moment. You're really ready to risk everything for this? For us, Catherine corrected. The question is, are you ready for what comes next? Because once I start this fight, there's no going back to being just a quiet Kansas farmer. His answer was to take her hand, his calluses rough against her palm. Together they looked out over the land that had brought them together, knowing that the real test of their partnership was just beginning. In Marie's old study, Thomas found a bundle of letters he'd written her during their courtship, tied with a faded blue ribbon. He'd been searching for his grandfather's original deed to the farm, but these stopped him cold, his younger selves. Words spoke of love, dreams, and a future built on faith in each other. Now, reading them by lamplight, he recognized that same hope growing again. Thomas? Catherine's soft knock drew him from memory. Sarah's asleep. I thought we could... She paused, seeing the letters. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. No, come in. He held up the bundle. Sometimes the past has a way of lighting up the present. She settled beside him on the worn leather sofa, close enough that he could smell the lavender from Marie's old sachets, still lingering in her borrowed sweater. Love letters? More like life letters. Dreams for the farm, plans for our future. He extracted one, paper thin with age. This one's from right after Marie finished vet school. I was trying to convince her she wasn't crazy for choosing a farmer over a city practice. Catherine's fingers brushed his as she took the letter, handling it with reverence. My dearest, Marie, she read softly, the wheat's coming up strong this spring, like all my hopes for our life together. People say I'm selfish, asking you to bury your talents in farm soil. But I see how your eyes light up when you talk about building something here, a place where healing happens, where science meets soul. Her voice trailed off. Thomas watched her face in the lamp's glow, seeing understanding dawn. She wasn't burying her talents, Catherine said. She was planting them, like you're doing now. The question hung between them, heavy with meaning. Catherine set the letter down carefully. The board meeting's tomorrow. Clara's found something in my father's will, a clause about maintaining the company's original mission of supporting family farms. If we can prove our partnership serves that mission. Catherine, Thomas turned to face her fully. Are we still talking about the company? She met his eyes, and all the careful corporate strategy fell away. No, I don't think we are. Because if this is just about saving Palmer Industries, it's about saving everything. She gestured to the study, the letters, the life he'd built. When I first crashed here, I thought I was looking for an heir, someone to carry on my father's legacy. Instead, I found... She struggled for words. Instead, you found a broken-down farmer and his precocious daughter. I found home. The simplicity of her statement filled the room. In Sarah's science, experiments and your quiet strength, in morning coffee on the porch and evening stories about Marie, I found what my father was trying to protect all along, not just farms, but families, hearts rooted in soil. Thomas reached for her hand, his calloused fingers intertwining with hers. Catherine Palmer, are you proposing something here? I'm saying I love you. The words rushed out, unstoppable as spring rain. Both of you. And I'm saying that whatever happens tomorrow with the board, this is where I want to be. Not as a CEO studying farm life, but as a woman who's finally found where she belongs. He touched her cheek, feeling the tremor in her breath. You know it won't be easy. The board, the press, the community, everyone will have an opinion. Good thing I'm marrying a farmer then. Her eyes widened at her own presumption. I mean, if that's what you... Thomas silenced her with a kiss, gentle as dawn breaking over wheat fields. When they parted, he pressed something into her hand. Marie's engagement ring, simple gold set with a small diamond. Marie left a letter, he explained. Said to give this to someone who could love the land as much as she did. Someone who'd help Sarah bloom where she's planted. His voice roughened. Took me 3 years to understand she wasn't just talking about the farm. Catherine slipped the ring onto her finger, where it sat as naturally as if it had been waiting for her all along. What will Sarah say? Why don't you ask me yourself? Sarah stood in the doorway in her butterfly pajamas, trying and failing to hide her grin. I wasn't eavesdropping exactly, but Mama always said important conversations deserve witnesses. Thomas opened his arms, and Sarah ran to them both, creating a family embrace that felt as right as summer rain on dusty fields. Catherine held them close, knowing that tomorrow would bring battles with the board, scrutiny from the press, and 1,000 complications. But here, in Marie's study, surrounded by letters speaking of love and legacy, she was exactly where she needed to be. Outside, wheat stirred in the evening breeze, whispering ancient promises about faith, family, and futures built on love. The old fence post at the farm's boundary, weathered by decades of Kansas storms, creaked ominously in the pre-dawn wind. Thomas stood beside it, watching lightning flicker in clouds that looked like bruises against the dark sky. His weather-worn hands gripped a copy of today's Wall Street Journal, its headlines stark in the beam of his flashlight. Palmer Industries CEO's rural romance, corporate scandal, or calculated move. They're calling it a hostile takeover. Catherine's voice carried across the wind as she joined him, wrapped in Marie's old rain jacket. Not of Palmer Industries, of me. Your cousins work fast. He handed her the paper. Pete said there were reporters at the diner asking questions about us. They'll find nothing scandalous. She leaned against him, drawing strength. Just a CEO who finally understood what her father built his company to protect. Thunder rolled closer as Sarah's school bus appeared through the murk, its headlights cutting yellow swaths through the gloom. Catherine felt Thomas tense beside her as 3 news vans followed close behind. Sarah, Thomas called out as the bus stopped. Come straight to us, sunshine. Their daughter, and Catherine's heart swelled at how naturally she'd started thinking. of Sarah that way, ran through the first heavy drops of rain, clutching her backpack. "Is it true? Jimmy's dad showed everyone the newspaper at the bus stop. He said we're going to be rich." Thomas scooped her up, shielding her from both rain and reporters, now emerging from their vans with cameras. "Let's get inside before—" "Miss Palmer!" A reporter's shout cut through the wind. "Is this a publicity stunt to salvage Palmer Industries' failing family farms initiative? Mr. Miller, how long have you been involved with Ms. Palmer? What does your late wife's family think about—" "That's enough!" Catherine's CEO voice cracked like the lightning overhead. "This is private property, and that's a child you're frightening. Leave, or I'll have you charged with trespassing." But as they turned toward the house, an expensive black car pulled up. Catherine recognized her cousin Richard's driver. "Come on," Thomas said quietly. Ricky always did love an audience. Inside, Sarah watched through rain-streaked windows as Richard Palmer emerged from his car like a banker at a foreclosure. "He doesn't look like you," she observed to Catherine. "Different branches of the family tree. Sunshine." Catherine smoothed Sarah's hair. "Why don't you go work on your science project upstairs?" "But, Sarah!" Thomas's tone brooked no argument. "Upstairs!" Once Sarah's footsteps faded, Catherine squared her shoulders. "Let him come. I've dealt with corporate raiders before." "Not like this." Thomas touched Marie's ring on Catherine's finger. "Not personal." A sharp knock echoed through the house. Catherine opened the door to find Richard, impeccable in his London suit, flanked by 2 board members. Behind them, news cameras rolled. Quite the domestic scene. Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Our PR team couldn't have staged it better. The prodigal Palmer, finding love on a failing farm." "The farm isn't failing." Catherine's voice could have frozen the rain. "In fact, with proper investment in sustainable practices—" "Oh, spare us the sustainability speech." Richard stepped inside uninvited. "We've had our fill of Uncle Henry's rural romanticism. The board meets in 2 hours. This little experiment in country living ends today. You can't force a vote without proof you've violated your fiduciary duty, that you've compromised the company's interests for personal entanglements." He glanced at Thomas with barely concealed disdain. "The photos of your little church social romance were quite convincing, as was the evidence that you've been blocking legitimate acquisitions to protect your investment here. Evidence you manufactured." Catherine felt Thomas's solid presence behind her, grounding her. "Like you manufactured evidence against my father when he opposed your factory farm initiative." Richard's smile slipped. "Careful, cousin. Accusations like that could be costly. Not as costly as the truth." Catherine pulled out her phone, clicking send on a pre-written message. "Clara's presenting the unedited board minutes from 2019. Right now, the ones showing who really tanked the family farms program, who's been selling inside information to corporate competitors." Color drained from Richard's face as his phone buzzed. "You're bluffing. You really should have read Daddy's whole will. The part about an independent ethics board with full investigative powers." Catherine stepped closer. "I wasn't just playing farmer these past weeks, cousin. I was building a case." Thunder cracked overhead as if punctuating her words. Through the window they could see news crews scrambling for cover as the storm broke. "In earnest. This isn't over." Richard's threat carried over the rain. "No." Thomas spoke for the first time, his quiet farmer's voice filling the room. "But your control of Palmer Industries is." They watched Richard's hasty retreat through the downpour, his perfect suit soaked by Kansas rain. As news vans peeled out after him, Catherine sagged against Thomas. "I just cost us every ally on the board." "No," he turned her gently. "You just proved you're your father's daughter. A Palmer worth following." Upstairs, Sarah's voice drifted. Down. "Is it safe to come out? I really need to tell you something about my science project." Catherine laughed despite everything, hearing in Sarah's tone the same determination that had helped her face down Richard. "That's our girl. Already. Planning the next experiment while the storm's still raging." 2 plane tickets lay on the kitchen table. New York tomorrow morning. First class, the kind of luxury Catherine hadn't thought twice about just weeks ago. Now, watching Thomas pack Sarah's lunch for school, those tickets felt like admission to a high-stakes theater where their future would be decided. Remember, Sarah was saying, carefully placing her science project poster board in a protective sleeve. Ms. Chen said I can present first thing, so you and Ms. Catherine won't miss the board meeting. About that, Sunshine, Thomas exchanged a look with Catherine. You don't have to come to New York. You could stay with Aunt Jenny while we... No. Sarah's chin lifted in a way that reminded Catherine startlingly of herself at that age. We're family now. Mama always said family faces things together. Catherine touched Marie's ring, which had begun feeling less like borrowed hope and more like a torch passed. Sarah's right. The board needs to see what they're really voting on, not just corporate strategy, but a new vision for Palmer Industries, one that puts families first. Speaking of family, Thomas pulled an envelope from his jacket. Pete dropped this by early. It's from Marie's parents. Catherine's heart stuttered. She'd been dreading this particular consequence of their public revelation. Marie's parents were pillars of the farming community, and their opinion could sway local support either way. The letter was addressed to all three of them. Dear Thomas, Catherine, and our precious Sarah, the newspaper reached us in Arizona, where we've been visiting Marie's sister. Our first thought was of Marie's favorite saying, "Love grows best in unexpected gardens." She would have appreciated the poetry of her family, finding new happiness through a crashed car and stubborn hearts. Catherine, we've watched you these past weeks through the eyes of our friends in the community. They tell us how you join in the garden work, how you're helping Sarah with her science projects, how you look at our son-in-law like he hung the moon Marie used to love watching. Most importantly, they tell us how Sarah's smile has returned, bright as her mother's. We're flying back for the church potluck next Sunday. Save us some of your apple pie. Jenny says it's becoming quite famous, even if Thomas has to rescue the crust sometimes. All our love, Grammy and Pops. Catherine hadn't realized she was crying until Sarah hugged her fiercely. See? They understand like I did. Like Mama would. Thomas cleared his throat gruffly. Your grandmother never could resist playing matchmaker, even from Arizona. She's playing something bigger than matchmaker. Catherine wiped her eyes, CEO mind whirring. The farming community's support could be crucial at the board meeting. If we can show that Palmer Industries' future lies in genuine partnership with family farms, not just show. Thomas pulled out his grandfather's original deed, the one they'd found while discovering those love letters. Prove 5 generations of soil records, crop rotations, weather patterns, real data about sustainable farming practices, combined with Sarah's science project on modern agricultural techniques. Catherine felt momentum building, theory and practice, tradition and innovation, and love. Sarah added firmly, don't forget the love part. A horn honked outside the school bus. Sarah gathered her project carefully, then hugged them both. Good luck with the fancy board, people. Tell them, she paused at the door, tell them sometimes the best things grow from accidents. Like Mama's prized roses that grew where the wind blew seeds, or our family that grew from a crashed car. After she left, Thomas and Catherine stood in the morning light, their shadows merging on Marie's kitchen floor. She's right, you know. Thomas touched the plane tickets. About accidents and growth. I spent 3 years afraid of change, of dishonoring Marie's memory by moving forward. Then you crashed into my wheat field and found the life I didn't know I was looking for. Catherine leaned into him. Do you think we can make them understand? The board, the shareholders, they see everything in terms of profit margins. Then we'll show them a different kind of profit. He kissed her softly. The kind that grows in small gardens and family bonds. The kind your father understood. Catherine thought of her father, of Marie, of all the love that had brought them to this moment. Ready to face the corporate lions, Farmer Miller. Ready to face anything, Miss Palmer. He picked up their bags. As long as we're facing it together. They locked the farmhouse, their home, and headed toward a future neither had imagined just weeks ago. Behind them, Marie's garden bloomed bright against the autumn morning, while ahead, Sarah's school bus disappeared over the rise, carrying their greatest argument for the power of unexpected love. The deed to Miller Family Farms lay before the Palmer Industries Board of Directors, its age-yellowed pages a stark contrast to the sleek corporate boardroom. Catherine stood at her father's old position at the head of the table, Thomas and Sarah flanking her like anchors in a storm. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," Catherine began, her voice carrying the weight of generations, "you're looking at more than a property deed. You're looking at 75 years of agricultural history, soil samples, crop rotations, climate adaptations, the kind of practical wisdom that spreadsheets can't capture." Richard shifted in his seat, but Clara's presence beside him, armed with those damaging board minutes, kept him silent. "My father understood something fundamental about agriculture," Catherine continued. "He knew that real innovation doesn't replace tradition, it enhances it." Sarah stepped forward, her science project displayed on the room's massive screen. "In my experiments, I compared 3 farming methods: traditional techniques like my daddy uses, corporate farming like in the company's reports, and a new combined approach Ms. Catherine helped me design." The board members leaned forward. Despite themselves, there was something compelling about this small girl in her carefully pressed dress, speaking with such authority about soil composition and crop yields. "The corporate farms showed higher initial yields," Sarah continued, pointing to her charts. "But after 3 growing cycles, soil quality dropped by 40%. The traditional methods maintained soil health but couldn't match production levels. But the combined approach?" She clicked to her final slide. 15% higher yields and improved soil quality. Because, as my mama used to say, nature works best when we work with it, not against it. Thomas stepped forward then, his farmer's presence commanding unexpected attention in the corporate setting. "What our daughter is showing you isn't just science, it's a blueprint for Palmer Industries' future. A way to honor Henry Palmer's vision while meeting modern demands." Catherine watched the board's reactions. The older members, who'd known her father, were nodding. The younger ones looked intrigued by the data. Even Richard seemed unable to dismiss Sarah's precise analysis. "We've already begun implementing these methods at Miller Farms," Catherine added. "Which brings me to our proposal." She distributed folders containing detailed business plans. "A nationwide network of demonstration farms, partnering Palmer Industries' resources with generational farming knowledge. Not acquisitions, true partnerships with profit sharing and sustainable practices at their core." "And who would oversee this partnership program?" Richard's voice dripped skepticism. "We would." Catherine took Thomas's hand. "Together. A Palmer who understands corporate infrastructure and a Miller who knows the heart of farming. With a daughter who represents the future we're building. A rather convenient arrangement," Richard sneered. "The board might question your objectivity, given your personal entanglements." "The board," Clara interrupted smoothly, "might be more concerned with the documentation I've distributed regarding certain unauthorized stock transfers and leaked trade secrets." She smiled thinly at Richard. "Speaking of objectivity, the next. Our past in a blur of votes, resolutions, and corporate maneuvering." When it ended, Catherine found herself still standing at her father's old place, but with a new title, Executive Chair of Sustainable Agriculture. Thomas would head the partnership program, bringing his farming wisdom to a national platform. "And Sarah, does this mean I can expand my experiment?" Sarah asked as they left the boardroom. "Jimmy's dad said I could use part of their corporate farm for comparative studies." Thomas laughed. "Think we've created a monster? I think we've created exactly what both our families were working toward." Catherine watched Sarah chattering with Clara about data collection methods, a bridge between worlds. The deed to Miller Farms, updated now to include Catherine's name beside Thomas's, felt right in her hands. Not a corporate acquisition, but a marriage of equals, of traditions, of dreams. Ready to go home? Thomas asked softly. Pete's running the church potluck tonight. Whole community's waiting to hear how it went. Home, Catherine repeated, savouring the word. She thought of the farmhouse waiting for them, of Marie's garden where Sarah conducted her experiments, of the porch where she and Thomas had slowly fallen in love. Yes, let's go home. Sarah skipped ahead of them to the elevator, her presentation boards clutched proudly to her chest. Grammy and Pop said they're bringing Mama's old research notes from vet school. They think I might want them someday. Catherine squeezed Thomas's hand, feeling Marie's ring press between their palms. Outside the Palmer Industries Tower, Kansas sunshine beckoned them back to their waiting fields, where corporate wisdom and farming wisdom would grow together, nurturing a future rooted in love and rich, dark soil. The wedding ring caught the late afternoon sun, its unique design reflecting both worlds it united. A band of polished steel from Thomas's grandfather's old tractor, inlaid with a thread of Palmer family gold. The local craftsman had worked for weeks to get it perfect, just as the entire community had rallied around their unconventional romance. Catherine stood in Marie's garden, where Sarah and her grandmother were weaving wheat stalks and wildflowers into wedding decorations. Tomorrow, this space would host a ceremony that blended corporate power with farming tradition, but today it was simply home. "Miss Catherine," Sarah called out, "Grammy's teaching me how to make Mama's special flower crowns. She says every miller bride has worn one since forever. And this one's extra special," Grammy added, her eyes twinkling. "Marie helped Sarah plant these flowers last spring. It's like she knew they'd be needed." Catherine touched the delicate blooms, thinking of the woman who had loved this family first. She did know, better than any of us. Inside the farmhouse, Thomas and Pops were reviewing plans for the partnership program's first wave of demonstration. Farms. The scene through the window struck Catherine deeply. Father and son-in-law, heads bent together over maps and soil reports, bridging generations of farming wisdom. "They're going to revolutionize American agriculture," Clara observed, joining Catherine in the garden. Her city suit looked oddly at home among the flowers now. The board's quarterly projections already show a 15% increase in sustainable yield metrics. "And how's Richard enjoying his new position?" Catherine smiled. "Oh, the Stockholm office is keeping him very busy." Clara's satisfaction was evident. Far, far away from any decision-making about family farms, Sarah bounded over, flower crown askew on her head. "Clara, did you bring the special paper I asked for? For my surprise?" "Right here." Clara produced a legal envelope with a flourish. "All ready for tomorrow's ceremony." Catherine raised an eyebrow, but Sarah just grinned and ran back to her grandmother. Through the screen door came the sound of Thomas's laugh, that deep, genuine sound that had first made her heart skip in this very garden weeks ago. "You know," Clara said softly, "when you first crashed here, I thought we'd lost you to some rural fantasy. Now I think you've found exactly what Palmer Industries needed, what we all needed. A reminder that the bottom line isn't always measured in dollars." "Speaking of measurements," Pops called from the porch, "Thomas says you're expanding Sarah's experimental garden plot. The partnership program needs a junior research division." Catherine winked at Sarah. "And our lead scientist has very specific space requirements." "Lead scientist, head of sustainable practices, and flower girl." Grammy shook her head, amused. "That's quite a promotion for an 8-year-old. 9 next month," Sarah corrected. "And Mama always said age doesn't matter as much as paying attention." Like how she knew Daddy needed Catherine, even before Catherine's car knew to crash here. The adults exchanged glances, touched by Sarah's particular way of seeing the world. Thomas emerged from the house then, crossing the garden to slide an arm around Catherine's waist. "Pastor Dave just called," he said. "Wanted to know if we're still including that Bible verse about faith, hope, and love in the ceremony." "And are we?" Catherine leaned into him. "I told him we had a better one, about new wine in old wineskins, about how sometimes the best things come from learning to blend what's precious in the past with what's possible in the future. Clara dabbed at her eyes. I should get back to the hotel, last-minute preparations and all that. She hugged Catherine, the CEO of Palmer Industries, marrying the head of our partnership program in a farm garden. Henry would have loved this. He does love it, Sarah said firmly, placing a finished flower crown on Catherine's head. Him and Mama both. They're part of the garden now, helping things grow. That evening, after the rehearsal dinner at Pete's Diner, now an official partnership program planning center, Catherine and Thomas stood on their porch. Sarah had finally gone to sleep, exhausted from her wedding preparations and excited about her secret surprise for tomorrow. Having second thoughts? Thomas asked, noting Catherine's contemplative expression. About marrying you? Never. She touched the flower crown still perched on her head. I was just thinking about new wine and old wineskins, about how love grows, best in unexpected gardens. Marie's words, our words now. Catherine turned to face him. All of it, her garden, your wisdom, my father's vision, Sarah's future. We're growing something new here, something that honors all of them while becoming uniquely ours. Thomas drew her close, their ring glinting in the porch light. Then I'd say we're having quite a harvest. Above them, stars wheeled across the Kansas sky, while in the garden, evening primrose bloomed like promises waiting to be kept. The new family portrait hung in the farmhouse living room, taken on their wedding day, but capturing so much more than a ceremony. Catherine and Thomas stood in Marie's garden, Sarah between them wearing her flower crown and biggest smile. But what made the photo remarkable was the setting. Behind them, experimental wheat fields stretched toward the horizon, a testament to their successful merger of traditional wisdom and modern innovation. 1 year to the day after Catherine's fateful crash, the farmhouse kitchen bustled with activity. Sarah sat at the table surrounded by soil samples and a laptop running Palmer Industries' latest agricultural modeling software, while Thomas and Catherine reviewed reports from the partnership program's nationwide network of demonstration farms. The Miller-Palmer method is outperforming projections by 20%, Catherine noted, unable to hide her pride. They'd named their integrated farming approach after both families, honoring the past while building the future. The board's calling it a revolution in sustainable agriculture. The farmers are calling it common sense with better tools, Thomas replied, but his eyes shone. Pete says there's a waiting list of family farms wanting to join the program. Sarah looked up from her data. Ms. Chen says I can present our results at the National Agricultural Science Fair. She thinks it could win first place. Our results, Catherine teased, but she already knew the answer. Well, it was Mama's research about soil biology and Daddy's farming techniques and your corporate optimization models and my experiments. Sarah counted off on her fingers. Plus, Grammy and Pops helped with the historical data. So really, it's everybody's project. Thomas squeezed Catherine's hand under the table. They'd worried at first about Sarah's attachment to Marie's memory, about whether their new family would feel like a replacement instead of a continuation. But their daughter had shown them a deeper truth. Love multiplied rather than divided. Speaking of projects, Catherine said carefully, how would you feel about a new one? Something more personal? Sarah's eyes widened as she caught Catherine's meaning. Really? You mean the doctors say everything looks perfect? Catherine's hand drifted to her stomach, still flat, but harboring their newest dream. Due in early spring, right around planting time. A farming baby. Sarah jumped up to hug them both. Does the board know yet? They will tomorrow, Thomas chuckled, though I think Clara's suspected for weeks. She keeps sending baby gift catalogues. Add to the office. Not that we'll need them, Catherine added. Marie's mother dropped off a trunk of baby things this morning. She said they've been waiting for the right moment. Sarah ran to the window seat where she'd started keeping her own hope chest, pulling out a small package wrapped in faded blue paper. Then it's time for this too. I was saving it for something special. Inside was a photograph they'd never seen. Marie in her garden, pregnant with Sarah, looking at the camera with such joy it caught their breath. "Grammy gave it to me last month," Sarah explained. "She said Mama would want the new baby to have it to know about their big sister and their angel mama watching over them." Catherine pulled Sarah close, feeling tears threaten. "You know this baby won't change anything about how much we love you, right? Or about Marie being your mother." "I know." Sarah's voice held the simple wisdom of children. "It's like my garden. Adding new flowers doesn't make the old ones less beautiful. It just makes the whole garden better." Thomas cleared his throat. Gruffly, "When did our scientist get so philosophical?" "Probably around the same time our CEO started wearing overalls and our farmer started giving corporate presentations." Catherine laughed. She gestured to the pile of reports. "Speaking of which, the partnership program's annual review is next week. Ready to show the board how country wisdom and city smarts make the perfect harvest. As long as I have my two favorite advisors." Thomas pulled them both close. "3, soon enough." Outside, the experimental wheat fields rippled in the Kansas wind, while closer to the house, Sarah's research gardens bloomed with possibility. The old farmhouse stood proud, its walls now holding new dreams alongside cherished memories. And on the porch, Marie's rocking chairs still kept their gentle rhythm as if applauding this unexpected growing season of the heart. Catherine touched the small swell of her stomach, thinking of all the crops they'd planted this year. Seeds in soil, yes, but also ideas in boardrooms, hope in communities, and love in the fertile ground of a family's expanding heart. Some might call it an unlikely harvest, this blend of corporate power and farming faith, but she knew better. The best yields often came from the most unexpected plantings. Sarah's journal entry on a warm spring morning captured the moment perfectly. Today, baby Henry took his first steps in Mama Marie's garden, right where Mom Catherine's car crashed 2 years ago. Daddy says sometimes life plants its best seeds in unexpected places. I think he's right. The leather-bound journal had been Marie's once, given to Sarah by Grammy for recording both scientific observations and family memories. Now it held the story of how a single storm had grown into the most bountiful harvest of all. Love multiplied rather than divided. Catherine stood at the kitchen window, watching Thomas guide their son's wobbly steps between the spring plantings, while Sarah documented his progress with all the scientific precision of a budding researcher. At 9 months, Henry already showed both Palmer determination and Miller steadiness, his copper curls catching the morning light just as Marie's had in old photographs. "Look who's visiting his mama's flowers," Sarah called out, pointing to a monarch butterfly landing on one of Marie's perennials. She pulled out her research notebook. She kept separate journals for family stories and scientific data, a bridge between heart and mind that made Catherine smile. The screen door creaked open as Thomas carried Henry inside. "I'd say someone's ready for his morning nap. Too much executive farming for one day." "Executive farming?" Catherine took their son, breathing in his sweet mix of sunshine and earth. "Is that what we're calling it now?" Well, he was very decisively pointing at which seedlings he wanted planted. Thomas kissed her softly, just like his mother in board meetings. Sarah looked up from her notes. "Don't forget we have the partnership program school presentation this afternoon. Jimmy's dad says the corporate farming kids are actually excited about learning traditional methods now. The transformation of their community had been one of the most rewarding parts of their integrated approach. Former rivals, corporate and family farms, now shared knowledge and resources, proving that the best growth came from cooperation rather than competition." Catherine settled Henry in his cradle, handmade by Pops from wood of the old barn, and lined with soft blankets that Grammy had saved from both Marie's and Sarah's babyhoods. The mobile above him featured butterflies and tractors, a whimsical touch from Clara that perfectly captured their blended world. "I found something this morning," Thomas said quietly, pulling an envelope from his pocket. "Was going through some old files and He handed it to Catherine. It was a letter from Marie to her unborn Sarah, written in the same garden where Henry had just taken his first steps. "My dearest baby, I'm sitting in our garden, dreaming of your future. Remember that love grows best in unexpected places, and family isn't just about blood, it's about hearts that choose each other. Like wildflowers spreading across a field, love has a way of planting itself exactly where it's needed most." "She knew," Sarah whispered, reading over Catherine's shoulder. "Somehow, Mama knew you'd find us. She knew love would find you." Catherine corrected gently, "In whatever form you needed." Thomas wrapped an arm around them both, while Henry slept peacefully in his cradle of past and present. Through the window, they could see the demonstration fields, where their Miller-Palmer method was revolutionizing sustainable agriculture. Beyond that, corporate towers rose against the horizon, no longer enemies, but partners in preserving family. Of farming traditions, Sarah returned to her journal, adding a final note. "Grammy says every good story has seeds of the next one inside it. Our story started with a crash and grew into something bigger than any of us imagined. Now we're growing more than crops. We're growing hope for other farming families, proving that sometimes the old ways and the new ways can make something better together." "Time for the school presentation," Thomas reminded them, but they lingered a moment more, holding this perfect morning. Catherine thought of that stormy night 2 years ago, when a wrong turn had led her exactly where she needed to be. She thought of Marie's garden, now nurturing a new generation while honoring the love that had planted it. She thought of her father and Marie, their legacies not just preserved, but expanded in ways they might never have imagined, but would surely have approved. "Ready to go show those kids how tradition and innovation make the perfect harvest?" she asked her family. Sarah gathered her presentation materials, while Thomas lifted a drowsy Henry. Outside, Kansas sunshine painted the world in shades of possibility, while somewhere, surely, Marie and Henry Palmer smiled down on the garden where love had grown, in the most unexpected way of all, exactly as it was meant to.